with that, I'm gonna hand it off to Sin.
Coming from both contracting and government. So I'm super excited. Thank you guys all for joining. I know it takes a lot, from your day. So when I was preparing for this panel, I went back and I was like, well, okay, where did data science start? And I found that about 50 years ago, people started talking about data analysis and discovery in databases. And then 2010 is when we see the famous Venn diagram that a lot of people know about that showed hacking and subject matter expertise and math. And now we're at 2020 and there's just an explosion going on, right? Machine learning is everywhere, from your cars to your TVs. AI is everywhere. Big data is still growing. Data visualization is growing. But, what are we seeing locally? What are we seeing in the government? What are the topics, the trends, the technologies, the skill set, the experience that we care about, right? So it's one thing to see autonomous vehicles, but what does that mean for us? So, the panel that we have today is a good split. We have two folks from the contracting side, and we have two civilians. All are experts in their field, all are leaders. So with that, what I want to start with is just do some brief introductions, but I want to add one little twist as an icebreaker. I want everyone to kind of tell me what excites them right now, right? I think there's a lot to be excited about. So first up, we have Marissa Wilson, the Vice President of Mesavita Engineering, with over 10 years of technical leadership and data science experience. So why I was excited about having Marissa, she has that unique blend that she's bringing her technical leadership from a company perspective, but also she is a practitioner. So with that, Marissa, if you'd like to introduce and then tell us what excites you right now about the field.
Sure, thanks, Jason. That was a very nice intro. So as Jason said, I'm a VP at Mesavita Engineering. We're a fairly new small business that provides data science, software system engineering, and cyber analysis support to the IC. For my day job, I've been a contractor at the agency for 10 plus years in different data science roles. Right now, focused more on the cybersecurity mission side of the house. And in terms of what excites me, I would say it's just how accessible data science has become. I love all the online training that's available through a variety of sources, and also things like Python and their scikit-learn library, how you can quickly pivot between different algorithms really easily, or Spark, developing PySpark, so you can move from Python to Spark easily. So I think that's what excites me, just how the barrier to entry has kind of gotten lower to jump into data science, and it's more inviting to a lot of people.
Cool. Yeah, that's definitely something that's going on right now. We're seeing an explosion there. Next up is Jason Wang, NSA Processing and Analytics Capabilities AI Machine Learning Lead, which is an awesome title, by the way. Jason truly is helping to shape how the IC is using data science. He is building some of the foundational platforms for AI and ML. So Jason, can you introduce and what excites you? I mean, you have a unique vantage point, I think, from where you're sitting. So I'd love to hear what is exciting you right now.
I'll apologize, my Zoom dropped out and just came back. So I did sort of catch the tail end of Marissa's intro. So I would like to sort of echo that and kind of reflect that, from where we sit, at NSA, data science is still sort of a fairly young venture, and we've been able definitely to take advantage of, from my lens, sitting a little bit more in sort of platform space, definitely been able to sort of draw from all of these sort of capabilities that are now sort of, becoming, fairly, I'll say ubiquitous, but I think some of what that sort of, ubiquity is in, what really sort of excites me is sort of, as we are sort of hyper-focused on, trying to bring data scientists to our enterprise and sort of grow our talent pipeline, that we are able to sort of shape sort of the technology so that we can sort of drive new, unique, creative mission, right? So it's definitely, yes, building on that sort of lowering the barrier of entry, but now being able to drive just sort of the growth and breadth of sort of engagement across our mission spaces, across our partners, in sort of sharing capability and sort of jointly establishing new tradecraft and algorithms. I think just building on, again, Marissa's comments of streamlining and enabling sort of an emerging talent pipeline.
Very cool. Next up, we have Dr. Bradford Kline, the Chief Data Scientist at Cyber Command J9. He previously was supporting Research Directorate, and he has a lot of hands-on experience with computer vision, image processing, media fusion. Sounds like some amazing things. So, Brad, can you, what excites you? I mean, those things excite me, so what excites you?
Well, thank you, Jason. Thank you for having me on the panel this afternoon. This is truly an honor. What excites me is, like you mentioned, I have a background in both computer vision as well as some natural language processing, some cross-modal fusion, and I think what's really been an eye-opener for me in the last few years is just how much computer vision and NLP, HLT, human language technology, however you want to characterize it, how much it actually affects cyber. I mean, we are doing a lot with those techniques, those cases in the cyber realm. Just in terms of just like being a data scientist and sort of from an academic perspective, I'd say I'm really excited by generative models, but I'm also terrified by them. And you know, I think that they can really be a useful tool going forward in terms of just, you know, generating whether it's, you know, text or image or even just sort of behaviors. Those have a lot of power, but of course, you know, with power comes responsibility. So I do worry about the GANs and sort of what we need to do to defend against, you know, misuse of generative models.
Cool. No, that's very important. We should dive into that in a little bit with some questions. But finally, last but not least, we have Bryan Pittinger, Director at Quevera. So simply put, Bryan helps customers and partners deliver solutions and solve hard problems. And the thing that excites me about Bryan is that Bryan's experience is a little more broad than some of the others that may be joining in on the panel and some of the other attendees. He has worked with FDA, HHS, local and state. So Bryan, what excites you? And then, I mean, is there anything you want to add that maybe that's a little different from some of the other answers? Not to put you on the spot, but that's
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I think you're right. My experience differs a little bit where I'm not quite as deep into the technical aspects of a lot of this, but I do transcend across a lot of different industries and a lot of businesses and agencies. So, so what excites me is it's fun to be able to see things that most can't see. Right, we're able to take data and information and turn it into an insight or a trend or an algorithm that can then bring about information to people that normally you wouldn't be able to see on a regular basis. And the speed at which we're able to do it now is just incredible. Like they were saying, with the new tools that are coming available and how we can connect everything, it's really exciting to see the speed and the pace at which we can do it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, you know, I want to step back a little bit then, because when I started this, I said the data science and I kind of threw out some things, but it's one of those terms that kind of get changed depending, right? And, you know, as contractors or us work in the government, there's sometimes like, well, are you a data scientist? Or are you a software engineer? Are you doing this? I'd like to hear like what your guys think. Like what to you right now is that role? And let me set it up just a little more. There seems to be another growth of like, what are the different types of responsibilities that individuals have, whether they're doing data engineering or pipelining or data scientists working in Jupyter notebooks. So when you guys are talking about data science, when you're talking about machine learning and AI, what does that really mean to you from both the tools and technologies, but also from the individual? And I think I'd like to start off with Brad. Let's start off with Brad on that one.
I think I have my microphone muted. I think there are a lot of different roles for data science, particularly at CyberCom. And I think one of the things that we look at is just kind of the full spectrum of sort of, you know, what's needed there. So it might be something just in terms of like getting data together in the same place, aggregating it, you know, making it so that analysts can sort of, you know, glean information or knowledge from that data, you know, all the way up through, you know, say, you know, very, you know, complex visualization suites, or, you know, maybe with some large scale graphs in there, and all the way up to, say, machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I think that where we see a lot of, you know, very complex state-of-the-art artificial intelligence, machine learning type paradigms going on with deep learning and all, I think there's still quite a role for just simple decision boundaries and that sort of thing. Just being able to like assist the human operator with, triage, culling through all the noise. So.
Makes sense. What about you, Marissa? I mean, I think you're probably seeing, different contracts, different people that you're working with or working on different things. How are you viewing the problem of, I want to be a data scientist, or I'm working with technologies, is this really data science?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking back when I started 10 years ago, it was a much kind of, I'd say, smaller definition. We were, some pockets of doing some statistics work, some analyst automation kind of stuff. But in the last 10 years, I think I've seen it really grow to be anything from data visualization for portfolio decisions to like machine learning to identify cyber attacks, right? So it runs a huge gamut now. And I think we've seen the skill sets sort of break in a couple broad areas. One definitely is kind of larger scale analytic development, which I think is coming more from the software engineering community that have moved in to have more of an interest in the analytics side, as well as people like myself with math and statistics backgrounds that are a little more, I'd say, geared towards the kind of machine learning algorithm development side and are sort of learning the programming side. So I think that's why, to my earlier comment, having these programming languages that have a lower barrier to entry have been great, coming from that math side and sort of moving over. So I think you kind of see those two sides coming together and creating a really cool community.
Cool. Jason, you're shaking your head yes. I mean, are you agreeing with a lot of that? Are you seeing, what's your vantage point? Do you see people coming in and like, I want to be a data scientist, and they're able to get the experience to do that? Is that kind of being recognized as a path with the folks that you're working with?
It's evolving. And again, I'll say sort of our enterprise, data science is a little young in our enterprise. And so we were coming from sort of this position where as we were sort of building our pipeline, we were sort of, expecting to sort of grow these sort of full stack data scientists, right? Of, having sort of full visibility of sort of that data grooming at the front end to sort of the kind of the feature exploration out into the then sort of expecting that same cadre to be the sort of build the mission expertise, right? I mean, you referenced the Venn diagram. And now I think we're getting to a point of maturity where we are able to sort of split that up a little bit. But I think, sort of building on sort of comments from Brad and Marissa, right? I mean, at the end of the day, where we are today, data science is still in service to our human analysts. So our focus is still on sort of decision support. So there is still definitely this big part of what we're looking for and looking to groom in our data scientists. That is in that sort of the narrative part of data science of, so how do we sort of bridge kind of the insights, that we are able to extract, statistical methods to sort of shape the discussions with our decision makers. Yeah, I think that's, right now we started from kind of a full stack picture, and we are now starting to, sort of do a little bit more of a deep dive into some of the subcultures of data science.
Okay. And so for Bryan, I'm going to pivot it a little bit. I'm going to kind of pivot off of that a little bit. So I come to you and I want to say, I want to be one of these panelists one day. I want to, be talking about data science. What advice are you, like, where are you directing folks? Like, we touched a little bit about all the explosion of training and learning. You're seeing it a little from the different agencies and your work at the company. Like, what is the advice that you're giving to folks? I like the people that are listening to this be able to walk away and say, like, I want to be the next Marissa and Jason and Brad and Bryan. What do I need to do?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. I think it depends on kind of where you want to go. When I break down data science, I look at it really three different areas. One being what we've talked a lot about in the analytics and the machine learning, the AI. But a lot of what we're seeing is that groups are not quite to the point where they can leverage a lot of the information that they do have. So I think of it as like a data capture as your first level, where you're either looking at transforming paper forms at one point into digital forms with workflow to be able to just capture data in a system that you can then use. And then being able to visualize that. So whether it's just a static chart or map, or whether it's animated maps, and then moving into your more algorithms and looking at it from a machine learning perspective. But then you also could go back, right? So once you get to a certain point with center information, then you start adding sensors into it. You start adding locations and video streaming, things like that. You start adding that in. Now you're going back to the capture and you're starting it over. So I think part of it is understanding where you want to fit into that and how you can help, because it's a huge, tremendous amount of help to organizations just being able to start from the capture perspective and get the information to where it can then grow. You know, that's been my you know, experience. There's been a lot on the capture and the visualization side, and I think that's a tremendous asset to an organization. And then you can then move into and hand that off to others to be able to take that and build out additional insight from that. So I think that's part of what I would say is, where do you want to focus? And then it's find somebody that really understands the area you want to go into, whether it's a mentorship, whether it's a organization that can bring you up, or if you're an organization, a partner that you can work with that can help bring you into the area and help with your expertise.
Awesome. If anyone ever wants to jump in, I'm just going to keep on going through, but if you guys want to jump in and pivot or disagree, that's fine. I have no issue with that. I'm going to try.
I did want to build on,
Go
and I
ahead.
did have to mute because we have some low-flying helicopters here in DC. I think they're still checking our radiation levels. You know, one of the things that sort of this, as we've been sort of maturing on data science during our side, is also, I think, you know, Brad referenced earlier, you know, some of the challenges we will have with hands is we are also now able to have much better conversations with our consumers of data science. So, you know, as we've been sort of maturing data science here at our enterprise, sort of building that sort of culture of trust. And I think that I was maybe something Bryan said sort of, you know, triggered me, but just sort of building this sort of culture of kind of transparency to the methods, and being able to have that conversation with our analysts or decision makers, or even our lawyers. We are sort of entering sort of this new phase of being able to sort of keep this discussion in a much deeper way.
Yeah, you guys are hitting some things that I think people are getting excited about. I'm going to try to weave in some questions that we're getting here. So I think, Bryan, you mentioned about the way that you're viewing it, you know, with the kind of like data ingest and the algorithms, and then I think there was a third step, but like, and then there were some comments about challenges. So one of the questions, and I would like to hear this, and Jason, you kind of made a reference to challenges. Like, what are some of the challenges that we can talk about, right? What are some of the challenges that we're all seeing? And one example that was asked about is, like, keeping the data separate is something that we, I think, instinctively do sometimes in the government, but you kind of maybe lose some of the value bringing it together. And maybe we're a private industry, they're not dealing with maybe some of the sensitive information, they have no issue, just let's throw it all together and see what happens. Like, how are we addressing that? Is that a challenge? And, you know, are there other things? So how about Brad? Brad, you want to take a shot on that, and then I'll go around a little.
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack in that there, but I think that there is, you know, quite a bit of, you know, power to you know, so bringing the data together is one of the big challenges that we still are facing. Sort of how do you know, get the data co-located and normalized so that you can work with it, you know, and make you know, models from it or whatever. And I saw in the chat that there was a question about data engineer versus data scientist. So I think, you know, the engineering of the, you know, we talk in the data science community certainly at the agency at NSA. I think, you know, I've heard people say it before, like, you know, data science is like 80% data munging, or maybe it's 90% data munging, depending on who you talk to. And yes, data munging is an actual technical term. But we you know, really need to get the data, you know, co-located, brought together in a way that you can actually work with it, you know, whether it's going to, you know, be to you know, draw conclusions or build machine learning models and that sort of thing. And the other challenge too is just that, don't forget that, you know, machine learning models themselves are data. So there's this whole aspect of, you know, how do we actually store our models and know when they're still working for us and when we need to retrain them and when there's domain drift or topic drift. So even just kind of like managing the data science models and ecosystem involves a fair amount of engineering. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
No, I mean, I think you're definitely hitting some of the points. How about Marissa? I mean, do you have some thoughts on that, on the challenges that you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, one of the things is just data is very big at this agency. I mean, we have a challenge probably like the Amazons and Googles do at that level, but not a lot of companies have the vast amount of data we do. And for us, we do, kind of going off what Brad said, have to focus a lot on how do we clean the data, how do we smartly summarize it so that we're not all re-summarizing the same data over and over again, and how do we keep a certain amount of fidelity to be able to run these models, to actually have the compute power to do it, but also not lose a lot of the features when we roll up this data. So we spend a lot of time kind of on that aspect of it. And then touching on another thing he said, I think one challenge is kind of the ecosystem that we've had at the agency. We have good analyst communities, we have good developer tools and collaboration tools, and I think we're starting to move that way on the data science side. Things like NB Gallery, just to share notebooks and stuff like that. But I think there's a lot more we can do to kind of create this data science community inside the mission spaces.
That makes sense. Bryan, are you seeing similar things from your experience?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what Brad and Marissa were saying. I think I'd also add that there is the human component too of understanding the data. So it's not just about putting the data together and how it's stored and being able to connect it. It's also who understands what that data looks like and what is it saying. So it's connecting all the players as well as the data and making sure that everyone's talking. And that's not always an easy thing to do when they're coming from lots of different places or have kind of boundaries laid out for them. So that's a really important part.
So trying to weave in another question that was asked about data storytelling, and then Jason had made a reference of kind of getting some of the stakeholders that may not be from the technical side, like lawyers or legal and policy and compliance, getting them aware. Like, is that something where we're finding a different skill set is needed, like for that data storytelling, that data visualization, that data like narration? I don't know what else to call it. Jason, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, are we running into issues with that? Is that like, is there room for folks that aren't technical? How about that? Is there room for people that are trained in humanities? Is kind of what the question was.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I dream of the day when I can go to our general counsel and ask, I need to project something into this vector. I have a query against this vector space. Are we allowed to do this? So we're not quite there yet. I mean, we definitely need to be able to drive more technical discussions, I think, with some of our policymakers for sure. But we also do need to have, again, in that sort of communications sort of space, be able to have better translators, I think, in our data science, our technical cadre, to be able to sort of shape some of the discussions we have with our policymakers. One of the challenges we definitely have in this, as we talk about some of the challenges in, sort of shaping discussions with lawyers and sort of building this trust, and as we've sort of become sort of big data, like our sort of frameworks and discussions around sort of policy and big data really have been sort of shaped by where we came from as sort of query-driven, sort of agency. Even as we, sort of become sort of like, big data agencies, sort of working with, sort of cloud-based, sort of infrastructure. A lot of that sort of discussion we typically have with our lawyers and decision makers is in this of, right, so finding a needle in a haystack. We have all this data, how do we find the nuggets? And that's still sort of a search question, right? So as we sort of get into this space of data science is about, the science of data science is about sort of exploration and discovery. We're asking questions in this sort of, statistical way. We need to sort of bring our data together, as, Brad and Marissa alluded to, right, in sort of this new unfettered way, how do we start to sort of shape policy to enable that? Because we're asking different questions, and we will be looking for some different frameworks. And so being able to drive that discussion from our technical cadre of specifically what we need, without necessarily having to say, I need to be able to project a query into a vector space, I think is we're still working towards that.
That's good.
And if I can add,
yeah,
just one other thing to that on the storytelling side, I think what we've seen as to be really successful is kind of these integrated project teams where you have cyber analysts, as an example, sitting next to the data scientist. I think that is hugely important in helping figure out what feature sets you want to use in looking at the results. We've done a lot of unsupervised learning with kind of a SME in the loop to really make it more of a hybrid approach. So for us, that's been a really key part for our data storytelling, is really bringing in kind of those traditional analysts alongside of us to help explain the results, make sure kind of we're staying true to the data and understanding it. So I think that's another really helpful way for people with those skill sets to get involved in the data science process as well.
Right. And can I add something, Jason?
definitely.
So, so I'm also seeing like biologists and others that are typically not in the technology realm. They're getting involved now because of their deep understanding of biology and other sciences, that now they can use their insight to help along with the actual data scientists, pulling them together to be able to really look at data in a completely different way. So they're now getting involved. And the same thing from an engineer perspective. Maybe they've typically been more on focused on engineering, but now pulling them in to be able to help create some of these algorithms and others. It's we're starting to see it mix. And the last thing I would say, it's also visualization is an art form. So typically, you'll see a lot of artists get involved in the visualization aspect of it, because that's really how you're going to tell that story, is through more of an artist's eyes than it is of a technologist.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Brad, you were shaking your head. I'm gonna jump to you. I'm gonna take something that Jason said and some of the other folks said, and I think you have a unique vantage point, right? Being in Cyber Command, and I've never really worked there much, but I'm assuming that the culture could be maybe a little different. And what I would like to see, like, do you have a culture over there, and are you seeing some of the things that Jason said is needed, like that creativity, that data exploration? Are you seeing stakeholders and customers willing to engage and be open-minded? And that kind of ties into a question that we received that was basically, people hear about AI ML, then they want AI ML, but they don't know what that really means. Like, how are you guys addressing that? Brad, do you have thoughts on a couple of those things?
So, so definitely there are pockets of uptake for AI ML. I would say that I guess one of the things about the cybercom culture, which I was thinking about before the panel this morning, is that one of the differences between NSA and cybercom. NSA is like at its core, it's taking data and converting it to information, knowledge, and intelligence. So cybercom is about cyber operations. So in that sense, it's you can certainly certainly there are a lot of entry points for data science. So for example, cyber defense. We're going to have a lot of data from maybe a possible intrusion, and then there's going to be data science can help with that. But at sort of at our core is sort of the cyber operations. And so there's definitely a lot of different pockets of individuals that see that they can make use of data science or machine learning. There's certainly providers, solution providers that will basically propose data science solutions that are like I said, some of these HLT type solutions, for example, to in the cyber realm. So I did want to piggyback off on some of what on the previous question too, because I totally agree with everything that Jason, Marissa, and Bryan said. But also, and certainly with Jason, I've been in that environment of trying to explain to policymakers or lawyers, like, this is what we're trying to do. I don't know if that we mentioned the phrase explainable AI. So explainable AI is becoming a big driver, I think, too, because when you have for example, analysts. So the analysts are not data scientists, but you have to bridge that gap to the analysts and the big concern right now is like, okay, your algorithm says that this is what I should care about, but why is it that I should care about that? So, you know, there's that other aspect too.
No, that's good. I mean, that was making me think. It does seem like our industry is a little more prone to skepticism, and you have to make sure that you're really checking everything and you're really sure about what you're saying. I don't know, Marissa, Bryan, do you guys have any thoughts from your perspective on that? The concept of having to convince some customers, and especially Marissa, you said you guys were having some, you were sitting in a role where you had people from different skill sets and analysts and stuff. Are you finding that some folks are more open-minded to this? Are you running in any advice on how to overcome some of that maybe?
Yeah, I think for us, we're not jumping into the, like, let's use a neural net, right? I mean, there's certain things that are more explainable than others in the kind of machine learning spectrum. So we probably, if we can use sort of techniques that are more explainable, not black box, we definitely lean that way. So like if you can use a linear regression, that would be ideal, right? Because you can explain exactly what is driving that model. And then even with stuff like we do some clustering, some unsupervised learning, and we'll have our analysts look over the clusters afterwards, and we output different visualizations that show them kind of how was the cluster formed, what features are driving each cluster, what features are different in each cluster, and have an analyst kind of sanity check that. I don't know that we're, at least where I am, at a point where they would just say, okay, this model's good, go use it. I think we need a human in the loop at this point. I think we could get there eventually, but right now, for sure, having someone there who understands the data, who has done this for years and can really kind of validate what you're doing has been huge for us.
But I want to stay with you for that, because you made a comment, and I want to understand, have you seen that changing? Like you said, like it's, starting with the linear regression, you can explain it, but are you seeing that the consumers and the stakeholders are getting more sophisticated, so there is more trust being built there, so then you can come in and be like, we're just going to use a deep learning algorithm here, and people are like, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of know what that means roughly?
I would say I have not seen that in my space yet. I would say I have seen where they'll kind of actually look to machine learning more to actually help like automate things or have insights. So they trust, I would say, the machine learning to provide insights that they might not get from looking at the data. But I would say full trust, I do not think is there. And honestly, for some of these cases, it might be a step kind of too dangerous or risky to make that kind of move. So I think there's more acceptance of how machine learning can help enable their job. But I don't think it's like a job replacement. I think it's really to help analysts focus where they need to, which is looking at a smaller number of results that are prioritized, already down selected, and that kind of stuff.
Sounds good. Hey, Bryan, I saw you unmuted and then I jumped in. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, no, I was just going to agree with what Marissa was saying, that I think there's starting to be some trust, but really we still have to prove it out. And especially for some of the sorry, I'm trying to remember my train of thought. But I think one of the things that we've always looked at is having somebody that is knowledgeable of the solution help with those decision makers, right? We just can't rely on them to trust us, that we have to find somebody that they trust to be able to work with them and get them on board, and then they can help with the decision makers. So that way it's a little bit easier of a jump for them. But I definitely think that a lot of the algorithms are becoming much more accepted, especially early on. I think that it's challenged just to see what you could get out of the data in order to be able to build something. But now people are starting to recognize more of what's possible, and then now we're able to get past the, oh wow, I didn't even know this was possible, to okay, now I'm accepting it, and now I just need to understand and trust what's behind it, and then we can move forward.
So Jason, from where you're sitting, I know you're working a lot with some of the different IC agencies and stuff. Are we seeing the agreements we need in place? Like whatever you can talk about, but are we seeing some foundational stuff being built up? Like are people starting to realize this is best practices, this is what we need, these are the areas where we know we have to go, or we across the board are doing everything the same? Does that make sense?
Yes. So yes, it makes sense. And yes, to your question, I mean, this is, again, sort of young. And I mean, we've been sort of a deep dive in, sort of cross community data science discussions for, I've been involved with some good community data science discussions for 5 years now. Recently, we've definitely sort of done a little bit of a pivot as a community into a little bit more of the sort of what's needed around sort of hardening, again, around sort of data and governance and things like that as we sort of move towards ML, AI-based solutions. And I guess what I definitely want to emphasize is, yes, this is sort of an evolution. We are working to solve this jointly. So as we work towards best practices, we're working towards best practices as an IC, really a joint IC DoD community. There are some major initiatives. There's the AIM initiative on the IC side. There's sort of the JAIC initiative on the DoD side. These are active efforts, recognizing that we're still young as a community here, and plenty of sort of foundational questions that foundational challenges that need to be solved.
Bryan, what about you? I mean, I'd like to hear, are you seeing consistency across the customers you're supporting, since you kind of are going to, from working with different groups?
Consistency as far as?
Yeah, just like best practices. I guess what I'm looking for is there's so much going on, right? And it's like, are we kind of starting to see, like, if you have a person, should they get spun up on Spark? Because we know Spark's probably 75% handling big data analytics somewhere. Or should people really just, Python, Jupyter Notebooks, Pandas, things like that? Is that like, that's like your bread and butter right there? You get that. And then if we throw you somewhere where you're using some obscure, like Julia programming language, we'll teach you there, but just learn those basics. Are you seeing some consistencies between the state, local, HHS, the other customers you're working with?
So I think the thought process, there's some consistency around kind of a common understanding, but what we're seeing, there's lots of different ways to solve any of the issues. So what state's using is completely different than what the federal space is using. And so while in general, yes, there is some consistency, like learning Python in one aspect really gets you far in a lot of customers, but then you'll go into another space and they have nothing to do with that. So I think there is starting to be, but you're always going to have new technologies come up. I mean, it's going to be constantly changing. What we know today is going to be nothing about what we know tomorrow, what comes out, what we're able to use. So you got to be flexible in that regard. But the common understanding and the overall kind of procedures for how you operate are going to be very similar.
What about you, Marissa? What do you think? Do you think people should be learning Python? Is that the recommendation nowadays?
I mean, certainly where I am, I would say that's true. I think at NSA, I mean, we're seeing I'd say there is some community still around R. I was a former big R fan and have moved to Python just because that's used, I'd say, more broadly across the agency, especially as software engineers are kind of entering into the data science space. So for us, I'd say Python, Jupyter Notebooks are really big. And then to scale things out, certainly moving to Spark and using PySpark. And I think for the agency, we still have kind of a MapReduce presence, given some of our analytic systems there. But I think we probably have, I'd say, kind of a core set of skills that we're using at the agency.
That makes sense. So kind of talking about what folks should learn now, we just did that. Where are we going, right? What are we seeing? There was a question that's like, what are some of the big up and coming things that we can talk about here, right? Adversarial machine learning. I think there was somebody mentioned the explainable ML. Are there things that are where people should be kind of preparing themselves? Like, should people be learning certain technologies and thinking about the hard problems in these areas now? How about you, Brad? Because you mentioned the explainable ML. What do you think?
So I think that I've been really impressed with how quickly, say, especially like the commercial sector has developed deep learning models. For example, whether it's convolutional neural networks or LSTMs or all the different types of deep learning paradigms. I've been impressed by the fact that they can propose a solution to a problem, and bring deep learning to the table. But I think also that, like I said, I guess I said this earlier too, is like there's still a role for sort of like the cap gun, right? We don't need a cannon Oh, I'm okay here? Okay. We don't need like a, you know, a cannon if we can solve the problem with just like a pistol, right? So sometimes I think, you know, we can, you know, go back to, you know, sort of old-fashioned machine learning paradigms. I think another point to bring up is you know, transfer learning. So I think if, you know, since we do often have the classification of the high side, you know, the high side, low side kind of barrier, I think it's important that that we learn more about embrace transfer learning, because I think a lot of times you can do machine learning, you can develop models in an unclassified environment, and then bring them into the, say, a classified environment with you know, some modifications. So I think that's another area to look at. Behavioral learning is another area, or behavioral modeling. Certainly, you know, we're talking about that in the cyber realm in terms of just, you know, modeling, say, cyber protection team behaviors as well as adversary behaviors. You know, how do you sort of model those in, you know, in a way that is useful and that has, you know, fidelity to be useful. So I think I'll stop talking. I think
no, that was great. That was awesome. What about you, Jason? What you were shaking your head a lot. So what do you think?
Yeah, I want to dive right into that cap gun comment, because you know, I think when Marissa raised earlier of you know, sometimes, right, so you know, having that discussion with the analyst, you know, about sort of the outcome of a regression method or clustering, and sort of having that sort of, you know, doing that sort of human in the loop mission. I do think we do want to, if the simple method gives you the fidelity you need, start there, because as we move into sort of the deep learning processes, there are a lot of things that unknowns that are introduced, right? When we talk about sort of transfer learning opportunities, like what data sort of constituted this model that we're bringing in? What are the pitfalls? What are the pitfalls of that data set? Are there biases in that data set? There are a lot of, as we sort of increase the complexity of the method, that drives up sort of the complexity of things that need to be considered. And so maybe back to your earlier question, Jason, in terms of, right, the things that we need to sort of shore up that you know, we're looking for sort of talent-wise. I definitely wouldn't lose sight of the, you know, kind of that domain expertise part of that data science Venn diagram of, you know, as we, you know, for our respective mission domains, being able to bring sort of good sort of statisticians, algorithmicists into that space to be able to sort of peel apart that mission, sort of that aspect of mission from stepping back a sort of a statistical look at the data. I think that's someplace, you know, so yeah, bringing behavioral scientists or, you know, a liberal artist, right? You know, a language SMEs or your culture SMEs. I think that's a space we definitely need continued investment in.
Okay. Marissa and Bryan, I want to get your guys' opinion, where you're seeing things going, like what's the next step. But I want to touch on one thing. Jason and Brad both kind of talked about the don't bring a gun, or don't bring the larger thing. Are we running into shiny object syndrome here, like we did with software engineering, where everyone jumps to the latest language? Are we seeing this, or are we naturally, the way that the agency and the government work, is that kind of naturally keeping that from happening, right? Does that make sense? What do you think, Jason? I mean, are you seeing that? Do you see people like, well, I got to do this now. Oh, let's look over here. And
so yeah, you know, I feel like we're better there than I thought we would be. You know, there was always this notion of, well, we'll sprinkle AI onto our mission, and then everything will be good. And I feel like, you know, our leadership is you know, we've had sort of a pretty good sort of nuanced discussion in this space, and part of this is around we know that there are challenges, right, of sort of again, what are these sort of underlying sort of pitfalls? What are the things that we, you know, with the sensitivity and the you know, sort of elevated risk of our mission outcomes and errors, right? We know that we need to be very cognizant of sort of the risk profile of these new methods. And so I think we've been pretty good about having that kind of a discussion.
That makes sense. Marissa, what are you thinking? Like when you're looking at as a small business, leader, and people that are civilians, contractors, everyone, what's coming up? Like what are the topics that we really should be thinking about now that there is going to be a need?
Yeah, well, one thing I've seen in my space is as like cybersecurity kind of started sort of in our mission area, right? And now commercially it's everywhere. So there's cybersecurity, areas in financial institutions, pretty much any tech company all over the place. So I think part of it is learning from what they're doing and seeing how they're advancing and pulling that back into our space. So there's way more companies out there now looking at net flow and big packet capture data and doing stuff with that. So I think a lot of it is looking at how they've advanced there and bringing some of that stuff back into our space. And I do think it's an interesting, as our kind of these cyber actors get more sophisticated, how do we make our methods of detection more sophisticated? And how do we protect against adversarial AI and the fact that they know what we're doing and they're going to change their methods because of that. So I think to me on the cybersecurity side, those are some of the interesting challenges moving forward.
Cool. So Bryan, I'm going to actually change it up for you a little bit. I hope I don't want to put you on the spot here, but there was a question and you and I had talked about this a little bit and Brad had made a comment. So I'm going to bring this all together. Brad talked about transfer learning and then you and I had a side chat about some of the unclassified work that you were familiar with. What are you seeing, Brad? Like Bryan, from your experience, what are you seeing? Like, are you seeing transfer learning? Are you seeing there being opportunities to do remote low-side development in some of these areas?
Yeah, I think there's a combination. I think we've definitely had a good bit of experience of being able to bring some of these more classified projects, develop them on the low side, and then be able to turn them around and push them back up. I think one of the biggest things that allows us to expand the talent pool tremendously and not rely on security clearances for everything that we do. You're really able to expand our pool, and we can then develop them a lot faster on the low side because we're not worried about the specific data. We're looking at a problem and we're looking at solving that. So it takes some of the detail out of it and allows us to really focus on how do we solve the challenge at hand and then push it back up. So I think we've definitely seen that. And I would add that there's also the opportunity for additional tools because a lot of what's being developed is more of a homegrown solutions. And so we're also seeing the opportunities for products to be developed that can solve some of these, especially when you're looking at cyber. There's so much out there that there are a lot of opportunities as well.
Brad, did you have anything that you wanted to add? Because you mentioned transfer learning. One of the questions we got was they weren't sure if they heard it correctly, and if you had said the same thing that the way that we interpreted it. Were you talking about going low side to high side? Is that?
Yeah, I think so. I was just now trying to type an answer. I don't know. I don't see it in the chat window. I thought that I tried to type an answer to the question, but basically what I was saying was that I was not referring to anything specific, but there are some cases. I'm not going to say there are many cases, but there are some cases where you can actually develop a model, say in an unclassified environment. You could use some sort of stand-in for data. Like I think in the cybersecurity realm, that would be an example where you could certainly take packets off of your local area network and develop some sort of machine learning model and whatnot. But and then that might transfer into like a classified environment. But of course, there's always going to need to be some sort of adaptation of that model. It's going to have to happen. Now, if the adaptation is too much, then maybe that low side model isn't useful. But if you can just tweak it, then that would be a case.
Just one other thought on that. Depending on the classification of your data, obviously on the cybersecurity side, a lot of it is unclassified. So when we talked about that whole data engineering piece, I think a lot of that can also be done on the unclassified side. So both like cleaning your data, summarizing it, and then only bringing up what you need, whether that's summaries, whether that's running already some analytics on the low side and bringing that up. So I think we've seen the agency move that way, which I think has been awesome. Both from a tool set on the low side, cost savings on moving data low to high, And then, as Bryan mentioned, just a lot of people want their phones, want to work from home. So it definitely helps from actually getting talent in and being able to hire.
Jason, you're shaking your head like crazy. You got anything on that you want to add, or?
No, I mean, full stop agreement there. And maybe back to sort of a prior question about, like, what are we looking, shaping, sort of like the language adoption, right, of sort of for our data scientists. I think the way we've been sort of driving our work is, we're taking a ton of cues from, academia, right? What are the the skills and background and sort of the languages of comfort and IDEs and frameworks that are coming out of sort of academic pipelines, because we know we need to support those in our low side space and then in our high side space as well. The one thing I did want to maybe a bit of a rabbit hole, right? Because I mean, if we are talking about sort of opportunities, right, with sort of transfer learning, we have sort of models that are built on the low side. The model is has some foundational sort of some training data that we need to know sort of what the shape and characteristics of that training data is. But then that sort of model is a bit of a threat vector. Right? That's something we know we need to sort of be aware of as we sort of take that as a bundle and introduce that into our mission. So that's it's just sort of a space of consideration.
Cool. So we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to go down the line and I'm going to ask this last question, and you guys can talk the way that however long you want, I guess, but within 5 minutes. Whenever I go to a conference, whenever I go to a panel, whenever I have a meetup, I'm always like, what is the thing that I hope someone walks away with? What is the actionable thing? So starting with Bryan, what do you hope, people that are listening, what do you want them to take away, right? What is something that they should go and reflect on and like, I should learn this or do this or think about this? So go ahead, Bryan.
So you could talk in lots of different directions on this. I would say that the one biggest thing is that the opportunities are endless, right? We have the ability to really push the envelope, so to speak, with the technologies that we have. So I would say really jump in. That there's a challenge in every situation that you come across where you need to understand the business aspect, the data aspect, and then be able to do something with that. So there's going to be a need in all cases. So if you leave anything with it, just jump in and get started on it. Don't be afraid to really to leap in with everything.
And I guess that kind of goes back to what, circling back from the very beginning, and there was, I think people were highlighting, there's an explosion of opportunity. There's a lot of resources, a ton of courses, a ton of data, even some of the stuff that Brad and Marissa talking about, capturing your own data packets or looking for open source cyber data sets that you can practice with. So it shouldn't be as intimidating, right? Not everyone feels like you don't have to go through a MIT PhD program to become a data scientist, is I think what you're kind of saying. Is that fair?
Yes, exactly. That's right.
Okay. Marissa, what about you? What do you want people to walk away with?
Yeah, mine's sort of similar to Bryan's. I think data science is different than other things we've seen, right? So the kind of art of the possible, you don't always know till you get in there. So I think from the government side or the project lead side, I think don't be afraid to embed a data scientist into your space and see what can happen. I think there's a lot of opportunities from that. From a small business side, I think it's all about the people. So if you want to build out a capability for data science, hire 1 or 2 good data scientists. And I think it grows from there. So I think kind of just get someone in there, get them doing good work. And I think you can kind of see what happens from there with data science.
Okay. So do not be afraid of data scientists.
Yes, exactly.
Got it. What about you, Brad?
So I think we just spoke about how there's endless opportunities in data science. I want to circle back to something that Marissa said at the very beginning, which was that if there's like a low bar to entry, like, there's definitely like ways to get involved. And I think, I guess the takeaway I would have, or the takeaway I would like to leave folks is, no matter what your business is, look for those opportunities to incorporate data science. I mean, the example that comes to mind is, for example, one of my email service providers, right? All they really have to do is provide email, right? Just send and receive emails, right? But you know, they use some data science to target me with ads, whether I like it or not. And now, you know, my favorite email service provider like has a generative model that like tells me how I might want to finish my email sentence. And that's again, like, you know, I've got a buddy that says, I don't like that. I never tab complete that because I feel like I'm being taken over. But the fact is, like, they figured out a way to, you know, maybe make life a little bit easier for people when they're composing emails. So the takeaway just being that there's, no matter what your business is, there's probably some way to incorporate data science to make your customers happier or scared.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, data science has been around, like I said earlier, and there's still a lot of opportunities and little tweaks and little things that people do. So I think that's good to remind everyone that there's still opportunities there. And then Jason, I'll let you close it out. What do you think?
In a minute, I agree absolutely with Brian, Brad, and Marissa. We are wholly focused on the talent pipeline, bringing data scientists in to start to uncover the creative things that can be done for our mission. And I think the leap behind I would have is we as an enterprise are fully committed to developing our platforms and our processes to engage, to streamline the experience for those data scientists when we bring them in. We need to support them in the creative ways that they need to work. So that's my leap behind.
Awesome. Well, let's wrap it up. So Jason, Brad, Marissa, and Brian, thank you guys so much for taking the time. You guys are awesome, experts in the field. That was some amazing insights. I think you guys brought some interesting things. You actually got me a lot of things I need to think about. Thank you, AFCEA, for hosting. I think this, you know, was a privilege, and I am very honored to be able to moderate this. And Kirsten, Rebecca for hosting. And I guess that's it. Rebecca, do you want me just to sign it off?
I just want to say thank you guys. This was fantastic, and I think I got cut off in the beginning with the video, but just wanted to let everyone know that this was recorded. So if you all want to watch it again, or if you had to jump off, it will be available after the fact. So thank you all, and if anyone has any ideas for any other upcoming Lunch and Learns, please reach out to Jason or myself or Eric DeVito, and we will definitely take into consideration. All right, I think Becca, you can shut us out now.
See you guys. Thanks, Brad, Marissa, Brian, Jason. Thanks, Kirsten.